You mentioned that there is a process. I would love if you could spell out exactly how that process is working. Is it in conjunction with the Justice Department, who in the White House is handling it? And then you could answer whether the Hunter one was inside or outside of that process, but let's start with the process.
Well, no. As it relates to more commutations, more pardons, that process, obviously the Department of Justice is involved in that. There's a review process, and so that's how we're going to move forward on making those types of decisions.
Is it that the president believes in the justice system except in some cases?
No one would be criminally prosecuted with felony offenses with these facts.
Does he have a response to that kind of criticism? Some people feel that their sons and daughters deserve the same.
He speaks to how Republicans have politically gone after his son over and over again and continue to say they're not going to stop. He's taking this very seriously.
He expressed any regret to you directly, personally, for having put you in this position and now having to go back?
He believes when it comes to his family, when it comes to how he moves forward about thinking about his family, they're the beginning, the middle, and the end. And he wrestled with this.
You mentioned that there is a process. I would love if you could spell out exactly how that process is working. Is it in conjunction with the Justice Department, who in the White House is handling it? And then you could answer whether the Hunter one was inside or outside of that process, but let's start with the process.
Well, no, I actually answered that question on Monday. The president made the decision on the pardon for Hunter Biden. The White House reached out to the Department of Justice because that has to be filed with the Department of Justice. It was the president's decision. There was no consultation with the Department of Justice. As you know, the president has the right to do this. So that was obviously a very separate process. As it relates to more commutations, more pardons, that process, obviously the Department of Justice is involved in that. There's a review process, and so that's how we're going to move forward on making those types of decisions.
Is it that the president believes in the justice system except in some cases?
He believes in the justice system. He believes the facts are. Obviously, I talked about the gun charges, what legal experts have said, former prosecutors have all agreed virtually no one would be criminally prosecuted for underlying factors of Hunter's case. I talked about the gun charges, I talked about the taxes, the tax cases, and there are other factors here, what Republicans have said. As they weren't going to let up. I talked about the upcoming sentencing and what Hunter and his family have been through. I talked about the appointees by the incoming president on law enforcement positions, and he wrestled with it. He did. And I also talked about what Jim Clyburn said. So you're asking me about an apology, but Jim Clyburn said himself in a conversation that he had with the president just 2 weeks ago, the president said, the president was reticent. When he encouraged the president, when he himself, Jim Clyburn, encouraged the president to move forward with it, Congressman Clyburn, the president, responded to him by saying he was reticent. And so this was not an easy decision. It wasn't. It wasn't an easy decision. It was a lot of circumstances here. And we can't pass over what legal experts and former U.S. attorneys have said on this, and across the country, they've all basically agreed, virtually, no one would be criminally prosecuted with felony offenses with these facts. And I have gone through the two important underlying facts of the cases. And, I just don't have anything beyond that to add or to say. I've laid out our thought process. The president has laid out his thought process, and we've talked about the case. We've talked about his thinking, and I just don't have anything beyond that.
Does he have a response to that kind of criticism?
Look, again, I just laid out what the actions.
I don't. Does he get that some people feel that their sons and daughters deserve the same? And
so I will say, and I keep going back to his comprehensive written statement because he speaks to his thought process. Obviously, I've said this many times. He speaks to wrestling with this. He speaks to the underlying factors, as I've mentioned many times from here, and he speaks to how Republicans have politically gone after his son over and over again and continue to say they're not going to stop. And you've heard from legal experts who have said that if his name was Joe Smith.
I'm asking about these other people who are also in jail and were also convicted.
Right, and I've answered that by talking about the actions that the president has taken. I've answered that by pointing to the president's statements, him wrestling with this and laying out his thought process. It was in his own words. And you also asked me if there are going to be additional pardons. There will be. We're reviewing it. We're trying to figure out the next steps in this, and you'll hear from the president on this in the next couple of weeks. But we can't put aside the important notes that I made about the actions that the president has taken on issues that matter to the community. And again, I said he's issued more sentence commutation at this point in his presidency than any of his recent predecessors at this same point in their first terms. That matters. He's taken this very seriously, and so that's what I hope folks would take from that. A president that's been very serious, that's taken actions, and that's how I'm going to answer that question. Go ahead.
When you're standing there at the lectern, you are White House Press Secretary speaking on behalf of the president, conveying his thoughts and views of the administration. And it's for that reason that you said on his behalf all those times that he had no plans to do what he did on Sunday. Has he expressed any regret to you directly, personally, for having put you in this position and now having to go back?
Look, I understand this question, and I think the way you started off the question is basically how I feel, right? And I think all of us who work in this administration, I work for the president, I speak for the president, I comment on behalf of what he feels and thinks, and that's my job. That's my job as the press secretary, the White House press secretary, the person who speaks on behalf of the President of the United States, and that's how I feel. I feel like it's my...
Did he apologize to you?
Look, there's no apology needed, maybe, to answer that question. No apology needed. What I will say is, this is a president. You've heard me talk about the legal experts, what they have said, how they agreed with the president in taking this action. You've heard me say that over and over again. I've laid out quotes from different U.S. attorneys, prosecutors, who really laid out how the underlying factors of Hunter's case would not lead to what had occurred in the past several months. And I will also say this, and you heard this president say this many times before, he believes when it comes to his family, when it comes to how he moves forward about thinking about his family, they're the beginning, the middle, and the end. And he wrestled with this. It was not an easy thing for him to decide. There's a reason why I keep bringing up Congressman Jim Clyburn, is because this is someone who spoke to the president just 2 weeks ago and encouraged him to do so, to pardon his son. And at the time, the congressman said 2 weeks ago that this president was reticent. So obviously he wrestled with this. So no apology needed from him to me.
One of the other things he often says is that voters should trust his, quote, word as a Biden. Should they still?
Yes, the president.
This was a pretty big, defiant public pronouncement by him that he wasn't going to do this anymore.
I hear you, and I understand. But the president wrestled with this. He truly did. And, I called out the U.S. Gov poll where 64% of Americans, that's not a small number, agree with the president's decision to pardon his son. And I think that gives you a little bit of a tiny window of where the American people are on this.
He sidestepped a judge and a jury's decisions on the cases involving his son. He criticized the political nature of the prosecution. The next president has spent the last several years vowing to upend the Justice Department and the FBI. Looking at their current and future presidents, why should any American continue to have confidence in the American justice system?
Well, the president does have confidence in the American justice system. And he said that in his statement. Certainly continues to have confidence in the Department of Justice. What he...
Two leaders who
okay.
single out incidents that involve them or their families and say, well, they're not being
Can I-
fair to me,
Okay,
but the
can I,
rest of you should
can
agree.
can I just be very blunt here? The situation with Hunter Biden and what the incoming president has said are very different.
But they're making similar arguments,
yeah,
which is
but-
that they've been unfairly prosecuted because of who they
But
are.
I don't think those two things are the same. I just don't. They're not the same. They're just not. And I think the American people understand that. I do. I do think they believe and understand that they're not the same. What the president's son had to go through, and what we've heard from legal experts, former U.S. attorneys general, who look at this case, who understand this case, and have said, there would not be this situation. And I think that's important to note as well. And they've been very clear about this. We've heard from many of them, legal experts, former U.S. attorneys from across the country, again, have all agreed virtually no one would be criminally prosecuted with felony offenses with these facts. I talked about these facts as it relates to the gun charges and tax cases that obviously Hunter Biden's case. And so that is, we can take their word for it. You can take their word for it. Okay.